Hello, YouTube. We're close to the end of Night Visions. We're on episode 11. Finally, I can get this thing out of my life and I never have to deal with it ever again. Okay, but we're not there yet. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, let's get into the first story of this one, Cargo. And this one stars Jamie Kennedy. So, I mean, if you're like me and you like Scream, then, yeah, I'll be a bit happy that Randy's in this. Although he definitely plays a different character than what I'm used to here. He plays like a nice guy that's not creepy or weird in any way. I don't know how to deal with that. What's he doing? This isn't even him anymore. Seriously, I mean, I mostly see him play characters like that. Like for some odd reason, that's all I see him play. So this was really weird to me. He's just playing a nice guy trying to do the right thing. I'm like, this isn't the Jamie Kennedy that I know. What's wrong with you? But anyway, yeah, so he recently started work on a cargo ship, and during a routine inspection, he starts to hear something that he thinks might be stowaways. So he goes to his higher-ups, who just say they'll handle it, or get really aggressive with him for some reason. I mean, seriously, the guy's just doing his job. Why do you have a problem with this guy doing this? He's just bringing a real problem or something to you, to people who might know what to do about this situation. And then the guy's like, oh man, you should have gone to that other guy before me. Yeah, he clearly would have ignored the situation, so yeah, why would he do that if he just had evidence that he wouldn't, that's not a good idea to do. But anyway, yeah, so he says that he's gonna follow up on it, one of his higher ups, but he doesn't really trust him, so he goes to go do it himself as well, and he gets some evidence that there probably are stowaways, and after getting into another fight with this superior of his, he finds out that, yeah, there are stowaways here, and they're in trouble. Not from the usual things like they're running out of food, water, or air or anything. No. Their problem is that there's something inside their cargo hold that's trying to kill them, and that they need to get out of there as soon as possible. So now Merc needs to decide if he actually wants to do anything about it and trust his better instincts and let them out, or if he should keep on taking it up to his higher-ups. But ultimately, after getting brushed off again, and Ollie being told that on the sea, the only law is your own, which I don't think that's how laws work. I'm pretty sure that, like, certain waters have their own laws according to what area of land they're closest to. But yeah, sure, it's all a lawless area, you're all pirates on the sea. So yeah, after being told that, he's like, okay, I'm just gonna go trust my better instincts like a normal human being. I'm gonna go do that. And so he decides that he's going to try and cut a hole inside the cargo hold, because I guess he doesn't have a key or anything to open it up for some reason. And ultimately he makes like a small little square, which I guess is good enough for someone to get out, or just for him to look in more. I don't really know why he made this little square. That's not going to help anybody, but he kind of stops after doing that, like, oh yeah, this is going to save everyone. I don't understand his plan here. But yeah, and so he hears something that is actually coming after the stowaways, so he just sort of looks at it. I don't know what his plan is right now. He's trying to, like, he's trying to cut a hole in the thing, but, like, he didn't make an actual hole that no one can get out of, so I don't really know what his plan is here. Just, I don't know, to look through it and hope for the best. I really don't know what his plan extends to, but yeah, so he's cut a hole in it, and then that one superior that kept on nagging him, he comes at him with an axe, which I would have a problem with, but he's using an axe, and that's my preferred weapon for murdering people, so I really do respect his weapon choice here, so I'm gonna give him a pass. So, knock this over. There, now the set's perfect again. The set part that you can't see is perfect again, so don't worry. So yeah, he attacks him with an axe for no discernible reason, and then the captain comes down, and he's working with this superior of his, and it turns out that they've been shipping these people for quite some time now, as they're not actually people, they're cannibalistic creatures. They don't really say what they are. I mean, they do give them a name, I just didn't really hear it, so, and it's not like a common folklore creature or anything like a Wendigo or something, so it's just like, I don't know. It might be a very obscure piece of folklore, or they just made up for the show, which I think is more likely. So, yeah, it turns out they're cannibalistic creatures that, after a while of being locked up, they tend to get pretty hungry and try to eat each other. So, yeah, this kind of happens a lot, apparently, whenever they smuggle them, because apparently they're very useful for the mob. You know how the mob goes around with all those cannibals? Yeah, you know how they do that? Yeah, just something that they need. That mob, they just need it. It's so helpful, those cannibal creatures that they have. But yeah. So apparently this is something that's actually been a pretty lucrative business for them for quite some time. However, new recruits aboard the ship, they tend to notice it, and most of the times they don't really actually trust it and try to help them. And this whole thing could have been solved very easily by the crew just explaining the situation to them. But, I mean, I guess there's always a chance that they wouldn't believe them, but there's also the chance that they would. Don't know why they don't just explain this to them, but they just decide that'd be really hard and annoying, so they don't want to do that. So, yeah, instead they just decide, well, let's just kill Mark. I mean, they're hungry, let's give them his head. And then just leave his body lying there and walk away. Like, seriously, the monsters are, like, going for his body, and they're just like, well, we've done our job. Just cut up the body and give it to the monsters. You have a really good body disposal system. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get rid of a body? You have a perfect opportunity here. I'm just saying, they're wasting this opportunity, and it's just annoying me. Usually it takes me like an hour to get rid of the bodies. So yeah, this story actually isn't that bad, honestly. I will admit that this was actually my second time watching this story, and this time it wasn't as effective to me, and this was my second time because last year I actually wanted to watch it and finish up doing this show last year, but I didn't get around to it. Because I didn't watch the second story that went with this one, and I just didn't watch the rest because I just didn't feel like it. So that's a good reason, I feel. So yeah, I just never got around to finishing it. I'm sorry, but that's just the way things happen sometimes. So yeah, this is my second time watching this story, and this time it was a bit less effective, but I will admit that this is still a fairly solid story, and a lot of that is because the main character is actually a nice guy that you don't want to see anything bad happen to, making the ending pretty effective. Seriously, I might say that it is weird to see Jamie Kennedy in a sort of role like this, but he actually does play it pretty well, and Mark ends up being a rather likable guy who just wants to do the right thing. However, he's also a bit too trusting and a bit naive about the circumstances, and that's what ultimately does him in. It's actually a really sad ending when you look at it like that, because he's not a bad person, and he didn't really deserve this at all. It's just circumstances are ultimately what got him in the end, and it's really kind of a hard ending, but it's still rather effective because of that. As for the stowaways themselves, I don't know, I found them kind of interesting. For most of the episode, you see them just in fear of whatever's hunting them down, and then you ultimately find out that, yeah, no, they're just like that because, well, it's more of a survival of the fittest thing than them actually being afraid for each other's own safety. They don't care about each other. One of them got hungry, and they're all getting hungry, and they all just want to kill each other. It's honestly kind of an interesting look on it, although I do wish that was a bit more built up by them maybe being a little bit more, self-interest serving throughout the story. Instead, they're just like, oh, don't worry, I'm going to go do this thing to help out this one. Yeah, they don't really seem as selfish as you think that they would be in this sort of circumstance, especially given what they are and what's revealed to be. And it does sort of feel a little bit contrived in order to just make the twists work, but still, I do find it effective enough in a way of putting some sympathy onto these stowaways, and then ultimately taking all that away. It works, however, logically for these characters, it wouldn't really make sense for them to be acting like this, but still, as an observer, it does work fairly well. And then there's the ship crew, which are just idiots. Like I said, they just don't explain the situation. Instead, they're just like, if we just threaten this guy, that'll make him stop. Or if we just tell him about the laws of the sea, then he'll get it immediately. Like, that's gonna work? Just like, are you serious? Do you really think that this is gonna work? I don't... And then it doesn't. And apparently this happens a lot. And they're just like, yeah, well, we should have seen this one coming. It's like this all the time. Like, seriously, guys, just explain the situation to them. I mean, obviously not like when they first get hired, like during their job interview. Like, oh yeah, and just so you know, there are some cannibal creatures on board some of the cargo ships sometimes. If that's okay by you. Yeah, that's just something that happens. Are you willing to deal with that? Don't be like that. But, like, you know... If they start asking about it, if they start talking to you about it and bring it up on 3 separate occasions, then yeah, maybe it's time to actually explain the situation as opposed to having to constantly kill these people to cover your tracks. I'm just saying, you guys are kind of idiots here. But still, it is an effective enough story, and I think a lot of that does come from the ending, with it being a rather bitter ending to this story, but honestly, I like it because of that. I do like more mean-spirited horror stories, and to me, that's what worked here about this. As for the next one, though, that's not exactly the case. So, yeah, the next one is Switch. Alright, so quick correction, we're on episode 12, not episode 11. Normally I check before I say it, but I didn't feel like it today. I just want to get this show done at this point, so I didn't really check. So I'm sorry, we're on episode 12, and I'm an idiot. So anyway, so the second part of this one is Switch, and this one has some really bad editing. Like you guys ever see 13 Ghosts? You know that editing where it's just like they keep on flashing between everything and hoping that scares you because, oh my god, it's all flashy and it's so quick! Yeah, it's like that. Except without as much sound effects. Or at least that's what it's like when we're in Sydney's head. So, yeah. It's not the best editing I've ever seen, especially not from this show. Okay, well... I say that like this show has great editing usually. It usually has decent enough editing, but like here it's particularly not that great. However, this one, for whatever reason, shows up in the intro a lot. I don't know why this is, but there are like 3 shots from this story in the intro to this show for no reason whatsoever. Because, like, most of the episodes or stories, they'll get, like, 1 shot in the intro, if any, because most of the time they're not even included in the intro, even if there is a good shot or something for them to use. They're just like, nah, we don't want to include that. Let's just include everything from Switch, because this is the best episode of our show ever, I guess. But yeah, it's not. So I don't know why they were just like, yeah, let's just really... push hard into this one episode. It's gonna be really amazing. There's also a scene from Cargo in the intro as well. I forgot to mention that. So yeah, I was really thinking, oh my god, this is like the big episode, isn't it? I mean, they keep on showing it in the intro. This must be a really effective story. So let's talk about it. So yeah, in Switch, it's about some girl named Sydney Cregg. And she has a lot of emotional trauma, mostly in the form of split personality, because of some past trauma that they don't really go into that specifically. I mean, I guess it was not that great parents. That's kind of it. That's kind of all they say. It's just like, oh, her mom wasn't that great, and her dad was also there, I guess. I don't know. They don't really talk about her dad that much. They're just like, her mom wasn't that great, and that's kind of all the information that you need to know about her childhood. That's all. That's all you need to get to know that her childhood wasn't that great. Just them saying that wasn't. That's how you know it wasn't that great. They're very, very subtle about the. But yeah, anyway, so Yeah, she mostly has her childhood trauma brought out in the form of split personality. And lately, her and her therapist, who was played by Jackie Brown from Jackie Brown. Why is she in this? She could be in such better things. Like Jackie Brown. She was in Jackie Brown, and she was like, oh yeah, this right here, this is the meat. This is the meat of this role I need to get to. This is the heart that I've been going for this whole time. Alright, so anyway, yeah. So her and her therapists are actually trying to get rid of some of her other personalities, and actually trying to get her to remember what they hold from her and what they try to protect her from, because, you know, she's older now and she can actually deal with this sort of stuff. So they mostly use hypnotherapy in order to go inside her head and for her to vanquish her other personalities. And by vanquish, I mean she talks to them for like a few seconds and then they're just gone. They just walk away. And that's how she knows she's good. Ugh, I swear to God, every time that happened, I didn't think that the personality was vanquished because she spent like a minute dealing with them. Like, there was one guy who had his ears cut off and is like holding his own ears. And she's trying to talk to him, and I'm like, he clearly can't hear you. And then he just walks away, and then you're just like, oh, is that it? Is he good? Could he hear her now? What's happening? And then, like, she's just like, well, he's gone, and then she, like, crosses him off a list, and I'm like, what? Was that it? And there's, like, another one that, like, likes to cut herself, and, like, she just talks to her and she says, I don't want to cut myself anymore. And she's like, okay. And then she walks away. And that's all that it takes to defeat these other personalities. Like, I get that you have a short runtime on this. I get it. But this is not how you go about this. Just have there be less personalities or something. Or just have her have already vanquished a couple so she could spend more time actually, you know, defeating these personalities, coming to grips with these parts of herself, coming to grips with these memories. Like, there's a point where I don't even think that she got those memories back, but then she, like, leaves the mind, and then she's just like, oh, yeah, I remember it now. I wish I had some good memories of my mom. And I'm just like, oh, so did you get those memories back? Did we just not get to see that? Okay, thanks, great. This is show don't tell right here. This is a master class in that. Oh, the story is so lame. Alright, so, yeah, she mostly goes into her head, and that's when the really great editing comes in. That really made me stop on this story for a while. The editing in this one is just so bad. Although the sets are pretty good, actually. Like, the sets inside of her mind are actually rather interesting. It's pretty much a very long, empty sort of hallway thing with a lot of doors, and those all lead to those other personalities that she has. She even has a map for this. It all looks kind of weird, and, like, it's not really... It's kind of hard to say. It all looks like it's not really right. It feels very dreamlike, and I really like that. None of them really feel like they're actually built correctly. They all feel like they're at an angle or something. I think it's mostly because they're using like a fisheye lens whenever they look down the hallway for some reason, which I don't understand. I don't know why they're doing that, but I guess they're just like, it's more dreamlike like this. I'm like, okay, great. You guys having fun with the dreamlike stuff? Great. Have at it, guys. Have fun. It's just kind of, I really just don't like how they're editing it. I really wish that you got to just here walk around this environment, sort of explore it, and so that would be really interesting to me. Instead, they're just like, let's just flash around it and make everything look like we're having a seizure or something for no discernible reason. I'm just like, yeah, thanks. And the way that she talks to her therapist is kind of like there's a projection of her on the wall. It's kind of interesting, and I really do like the sets in this one. The sets are probably the best part of the story, as this is probably the best sets that we've gotten on this show thus far, and it seems like they really did try with this, but it also seems like they didn't want to show that effort for no reason, and I don't understand why that is. They really could have made this look interesting had they edited it better, but instead it just doesn't really work. But yeah, anyway, she keeps on getting rid of more and more personalities, And the more that she gets rid of, the more personal they become, or at least according to her therapist. According to me, she keeps on dealing with them in like a minute. So yeah, she finally decides to, but eventually one does kind of take over for a bit, and then she just gets rid of them really quickly, so it doesn't matter. And that's just how that plays out. But then she decides to go after what's apparently her most personal one, which is a crying little girl. And it's revealed that's actually that's probably her actual personality, and that Sydney was just another personality that was created in order to defend her, which honestly makes sense. Sydney, for most of this story, is played as kind of a naive idiot wandering around. Well, I wouldn't say an idiot per se. She's innocent, if anything, and that does make her rather naive for most parts, and she just really isn't that interesting to me. Like, you can kind of tell that she probably is just another personality created, and so when that's the twist that's kind of revealed, it does make a bit of sense to me. However, also that might just be what another personality is telling her. It's kind of interesting that you don't really know for sure which one's the actual core personality of the situation, but yeah, she does meet up with this little girl, and it's revealed that she actually murdered her mother, which I guess is something that her therapist never found out. Because, like, she writes on there, like, the reason for this trauma, unknown. I feel like some form of documentation over Sydney's mother's death would kind of be somewhere, but apparently there isn't any. That's just how it is. There just isn't any documentation, and her therapist had no way to know this would happen. That's just how things work sometimes. So she finally starts to confront this personality, and she loses, and the other personality takes over and doesn't really do anything. She just sort of stands there and talks in a little kid voice, and just sort of confesses to murder, which is exactly what you would do when you've obtained your freedom. You would want to get locked away, potentially. That's what you do. You're a genius, little girl that cried in a bleeding room. You're a genius. And Sydney ends up trapped in her own mind behind a wall saying eternity. And throughout the whole story, she's been narrating it, and that's just her reminding herself of how she actually ended up in this situation to begin with. And I gotta say, the twist of this story actually is pretty effective. It's kind of creepy just seeing her locked away in her own mind, unable to actually get out, but the only thing that she actually has to cling to is her memories of being free. It's actually really a sad ending here, and I think it really worked. Like I said, I like darker twist endings, but the rest of this story just is not that effective. For the most part, it's mostly just Sydney getting rid of her personalities in a minute or less, and that just takes away a lot of the emotional core of what this should be. This should be about her embracing her other personalities, embracing these other sides of herself, trying to remember her past. It should be far more intriguing than this, but instead, it's mostly just like, let's just do this so we can move on with this scene. So then we can have this thing happen. It seems like they don't really care about her actually dealing with her other personalities. Instead, they just want to get from one scene to the next. And that would be fine if they actually had a bit more of an emotional core to this, but they don't really. Honestly, Sydney isn't that intriguing of a character, and I think that you really do need a more interesting and likable character in order to go through the situation. Like, take the show Mr. Robot. Something like this does happen a good amount on that show, but the reason why you care is because you care about the protagonist. You care about what he's going through. I didn't get that from Sydney. I didn't really care about her as an actual person, because I don't really get to see her as an actual person. For the most part, most of her scenes are just her going inside of her own head. We don't actually get to know what her life is like outside of this. We don't really know what she's fighting for. We just know that she just doesn't want these in her head anymore, which is a decent enough motivation, but Still, I think a lot of it is also you need to see what else she has to fight for in her life. Who are her friends? Who are her family? What is she actually trying? What's her actual end game here that she's trying to get to? We never get to know that. Instead, they're just like, she just sort of fights these other personalities in her head, like you do sometimes, and it just doesn't work. It's just not that effective of a story overall. However, the ending is actually rather good and a rather dark and tough pill to swallow, but it's still a rather great story at the end. I just wish that most of the story was like that. Except it's pretty much that the rest of it is just really boring and goes about way too quick for it to actually make an impact. And then, like, the last 5 minutes are where they actually decide, oh yeah, we should actually care about this somewhat. Yeah, I forgot about that. The whole caring thing. Yeah, maybe we should try that. So they actually do it, and it actually works. If the rest of the story were like that, I would understand why this one's always in the intro, but as is, I still think that episode 3 should probably be in the intro more. To me, that's still the best episode of this show. However, as is, this isn't a terrible episode. Like I said, I do like the story Cargo, or at least I did the first time I watched it. The second time I didn't really get into it as much, but it was still a decent enough story. But with this one, it just kind of dropped the ball for the most part, and that's saying a lot because I love split personality things. I really love that sort of topic. To me, it's a really interesting, to me, when it's told in a story or something, it can be used as a very interesting way of going about the man versus self archetype, which I really love that type of storytelling. That's like my favorite narrative device is man versus self. So really, if this story worked, I would have been giving it a lot of praise, but it didn't. And so I won't. It's just not that effective of a story. Still, Cargo is pretty decent, so if you want a decent story out of this one, then I would say go with that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this one, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next one, which will be our last episode. Finally. It took us 2 years to get to that. Mostly because I procrastinated the second time. But yeah, we're finally getting there. Finally getting there. See, that's pretty much it. Bye.